Hello and welcome everyone to this week's episode of Drawing and Dragons. Doing something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about druids. Before I go further, I just want to sort of outline what we talk about, like things like how players should come prepared with their animals and their spells, how dungeon masters you should be aware of how strong the moon druid is, because duh, it's the moon druid, and then for world building, like how to better work druidic circles into your world and how to actually make good use of the feature druidic. Player tips. So the first big player tip I have is make sure that you come with your your animal sheet prepared, as in make sure you know what animals you can transform into. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go get like an animal encyclopedia and have every animal listed and make this big giant book of all these animals and their stats. No, but what you should do is think about what animals will you turn into for different situations. Personally, if I'm playing a druid and I really want to make sure, and I know I'm going to be turning into animals a lot. Let's say I'm just a regular druid, not a moon druid, which we'll get to later. I might think of, okay, I'll turn into a wolf if we're tracking something down or doing a lot of like movement based combat. I'll turn into a horse if we're riding a lot. I'll turn into a squirrel if I want to scout an area out, or maybe a gecko or something because they can grip to walls, or some sort of little lizard. And then I'll turn into maybe I think a brown bear or some sort of tankier thing for in combat, right? And so that's really like four or five shapes there total. And then if you're a moon druid, you can turn to stronger, bigger things. So then you really just add like what's the best main combat one, what's like a really tanky combat one, and then what's like a utility combat, like an octopus or something that can grapple, right? And so yes, being a moon druid, you sort of expand your list, but I would say make sure you come to the table prepared, so that way it's not, oh well, can I borrow the monster manual? Let me flip through it for a couple minutes here, because the problem is if you're like in the middle of combat, you're like, I'm gonna wild shape, and then your dungeon master's okay, where are you shaping into? You're like, well, can I have that monster manual, please? You don't want that situation to happen. So come prepared with like two or three. Just take an extra sheet of paper and write down their stats. The next thing is, on the same track of being prepared, you need to make sure you have your spells prepared. So druids are prepared spellcasters, meaning you know your entire list of spells all the time, but you can only prepare a certain amount each day, and it's your level plus your wisdom modifier. So at level 1, I'm going to guess you can prepare like 4 different spells. So I would make sure to come up with a list of your favorites for different situations or different uses and write that just on the back of your sheet. So that way, if in the middle of the session, you all decide you're taking a long rest, you're going to sleep, you wake up, druids are able to meditate at the start of the day and change their spells and change which ones you want prepared for that day. And that can be difficult to know what's going to be coming in the next day, but try to do your best, try to cover all your bases. And so having a list of favorites will help you out. So that way you're not having to reach for the player's handbook and Xanathar's guide and like looking through this giant list of spells. You want to have it nice and quick and easy. So have a list of favorites. It's okay to whip out the book and reconsider some things. But I know personally on my druid that I'm playing, I have a list of my favorites on the back, and I have them sorted not alphabetically, but I have them sorted by what they do. So I'll have a list of my favorite damage spells, a list of my favorite general utility spells. I have a favorite list of healing spells. I'll have a favorite list of conjuration spells because there's a lot of those. And then I'll have like little tags on them, like if they're concentration or not, because that's another big thing you need to worry about. So come prepared with your spells for every day, but make sure you come with a list of your favorites, so that way when you are switching which prepared spells you want, it's quick and it's easy. Next thing for you players, this is where we get more into flavor territory. Consider your druidic focus. What is it? Is it the talon of an eagle? Is it the beak of an owlbear? Though those are monsters, not really beasts. Is it the bear's claw? Right? Is it the shell of an armadillo or a turtle? Right? Think of something that is in nature, and then think about how your druid acquired it and how they use it. So I know personally, I was playing and will be later on a spore druid named Twentook, and he is a turtle. And his whole deal is that he's got all of his mushrooms growing on him. It's a very, I thought it was original, and then I looked it up, and there's like plenty of people who've done the same thing where they're a turtle and they have their stuff growing all over them. So he has like mushroom. He's a spore druid, so he's got mushrooms like all over him. But especially on his shell, he's got mushrooms and fungus and moss and lichens and also and like even little plants and flowers and things all growing on his shell. And so his druidic focus. I talked with my dungeon master, and he has sets of mushrooms that glow. They're bioluminescent, and he has them on his like wrist right here. So that's where a lot of his power comes from. I also have a walking stick that I use as my shillelagh because that's what shillelaghs were based on kind of originally, was like a cane almost. So I have like a cane that I use, and that is also sort of partially my druidic focus. It's kind of both of them combined. So for you, think about what it could be. Some examples in the book they give is like the twig of a yew tree, or a branch of holly or mistletoe or whatever, right? So think about something from nature and then think about how your druid uses it to cast your spells. And that comes into my next topic of make sure you have cool flavor for your spells, right? For example, my character Twentook, I'm going to be using my character La as an example. When I want to use conjure fey woodland creatures, right? I take mushrooms off my back and I smear them on the ground, and they spring up out of it into like a puff of smoke and spores, right? So that's how I summon things. Maybe for you, it's more you lay something down and like something will come rushing out, or maybe you are taking different ingredients from a bag. I have a player, shout out to Rianne Alexina. She has all of her ingredients in a bag of holding, and she'll like reach in and combine different things. And so when she's using like cure wounds, for example, she will mix and mash and make basically this modge podge of like mud and leaves and moss and things and stick it on the wound, and that's how she heals things. So consider how you cast it. And I personally know I draw a lot of inspiration from different ingredients and different natural things, but maybe you just want the wave of your magical wand or your staff, and you want to be more just here's some magical energy in the air. Right? That's fine too. You don't necessarily have to have it be more material where you're taking materials and things. You can do what you want with it. When it comes to character building, the biggest thing I think you need to consider is how does your character feel about civilization? Druids as a whole are generally opposed to civilization, and that really depends on how you interpret it. Um, I would say some druids can be very angry at civilization because it disrupts the natural flow. But my druid Twentook, he personally believes that civilization is just humanoids and they're living, right? It's the same way that a hermit crab lives in a shell and that a beaver builds a dam, right? So he considers it just part of that same cycle, and that this is just how the humanoids live, and that is their natural way. Just consider your character's philosophy on civilization, and then by extension, the things that represent civilization. So dogs, right? Dogs were domesticated from wolves. So how does your druid feel about that? Do they like dogs and recognize them as a fellow creature? Do they hate humanoids and or humans or whatever in general for domesticating them? How do they feel about that? Also, then how do they feel about money and treasure? Okay, and don't forget that druids technically can't wear metal armor if they want to be able to do their stuff. That is specifically in the player's handbook. I always like to rule it that is how you nullify a druid's powers, is to surround them in metal. So if you wanted to trap a druid, you would put them in a metal box because then they can't use their spells. But it's up to you on how you want to flavor all that. So just consider, how does your character feel about civilization and the extensions of civilization? All right, Dungeon Masters, we're on your turn now. Some things to consider. Moon Druids are very strong. Moon Druids early game are very strong. In the later levels, they get less strong, and then they reach a power spike where they can transform into elementals, and then they kind of flatten out again. And then when they hit level 20 and they can constantly be in their wild shape, they are very strong once again, right? But by that point, they're basically gods. Who cares? They're superheroes. When your druid hits level 2 and they pick Moon Druid, you know you're in for a wild ride, because the brown bear, which is the reason Moon Druids are so strong, the main reason I would say, they have 34 hit points. They've got they've got multi attack. So there's a lot of things you have to worry about, right? That's in total an extra like 70 hit points on top, or 60 to 70 hit points on top of the player's regular hit points. So it just suddenly makes the fights a lot bigger. But again, you can exhaust this by tossing a lot of fights at your players. But it can be very, very strong. Once again, I'll shout out to Rhiannon Olaxina. She was captured, beaten down to low hit points. I took away some of her spell slots. This is when she was joining the game, and the plot was that she had been captured by some bandits, and the players were investigating, and they found her captured by bandits, and the bandit leader was like right there with like a blade to her throat. And then I, in designing this, forgot she was a moon druid. So she just wild shaped into a bear and just mauled the crap out of this bandit leader. I'm like, well, darn it. I completely forgot, honestly. It just had slipped my mind that she was a moon druid. Because here I thought, oh, she's pretty defenseless. The players will have to be really smart about how they play this. Because this bandit leader could execute her, take her down with like just 1 or 2 hits. So they're going to have to play smart. And then first turn, she rolled relatively well, and initially says, I turn into a bear. I'm like, shoot, I forgot she could do that. So keep in mind, moon druids are very strong at early levels. Next thing for you dungeon masters to consider is you should try to establish early on what sorts of things your druid players have seen and not have seen. By things, I mean animals. Wild shape is technically based on what animals the players have seen, but it's kind of up to you, the dungeon master, and what they have or haven't, and how hard and fast you want to be with that rule. If you want to be really hard and fast, they have to have actually seen it with their eyes. Or you could even extend that and say they have to have spent time with the animal or observed the animal for a certain period of time. It can't just have ran across the trail, right? Maybe they have to actually watch it for half a day or a couple minutes or an hour or something. I feel like that'd be kind of a big nerf, but maybe that's what you want to do for your moon druids, is that they have to acquire the new forms. That could be pretty fun for the moon druid, but can also be very annoying, especially when you get to some higher level stuff, because they may never see some of those animals. So I personally would not do that. But it's up to you on what kind of restrictions you want to put on your gameplay. But what you also need to consider is, does it count if they just see a picture? Right? So if they just see a picture of a polar bear, can they now turn into a polar bear? Right? If they just see a picture of a peacock, can they now be a peacock, even though you're playing in like a very Arctic surrounded area, right? So consider what sorts of animals they can turn into, and the biggest consideration is dinosaurs. Can your players turn into dinosaurs? Are you just going to say yes or no? And it really depends on if they're in your setting or not. My last DM tip is conjuration spells. There's a couple of them that druids get, like conjure animals, conjure woodland beings, conjure fey creatures, like a couple spells like that. Technically, as the rules are written in the book, you, the dungeon master, get to decide. I think the way it's like, there's a couple ways to interpret it, because basically you have to choose what kind are they going to be and how many can they conjure. Right? And it's like 1, 2, 4, and 8. And obviously 8s are all weaker and the 1s are all stronger, right? Because that's to balance out. So you could consider it where the dungeon master chooses both. Oh, you summoned 1 sea hag this time, and then the next time, oh, you summoned 8 pixies, right? Or you could mix and match between different creatures. Or maybe you choose the number and the player chooses what creature, or the opposite. I feel like the opposite is usually the most appropriate, that your player chooses how many things they want to summon, and then you can choose what they summon. Or maybe you predetermine it ahead of time, and you say, okay, when I do conjure animals, these are like the 3 groups of animals I can summon, and that's it. I know for me personally, right now the game I'm playing is Twentook, my Spore Turtle Druid. I summon a group of satyrs. And these satyrs, it's the same group of satyrs every time, and we have names for them. And we have this ongoing joke that they hate it when they're summoned because they always get in fights and die, and they just hate my character. It's a funny joke that we've got running, and it's kind of fun to be able to summon the same thing every time. So just consider how you want that to work. Do you want it to be all in the player's hands or all in the dungeon master's hands, or a mixture of both? But if you put it all in the player's hands, I need you to be aware of a very big, cheesy strategy, and that is summoning 8 pixies. Pixies can cast Polymorph. If you allow the players full control over their summoned creatures, which you probably should, allow them mostly full control, if not full control, then they could potentially use that Polymorph on all of your allies. So let's say you have a squad of 4, because that is the usual party size, we'll say. You have 8 of the Pixies cast Polymorph on them and become 4 T-Rexes. Then you have them the other 4 cast Fly, and so suddenly in like basically 1 or 2 turns, you now have 4 flying T-Rexes. and it just ruins nearly every encounter. It's pretty hard to beat that, right? So just be aware that that exploit does exist, and I do consider it an exploit. So personally, what I do is I say you choose what you want to summon, and you choose how much. And if for some reason they do the 8 pixies, I'll say I'll roll a dice and I'll see if the pixies are going to listen to that. Or I'll have the pixies, because pixies are very trickster characters. They're very trickstery NPCs. I will have them choose what the creatures or what the party is polymorphed into. So one of them might be a T-Rex, but another one might be a worm. Pixies, I tell you. All right, let's get to world building. So the first thing you need to consider is how does your player druids circle fit into the world? How does their group of druids they're from fit in? Are they alone hermits? Were they part of a circle once? Where is that circle located? Does it have a location, or are they nomadic? Do they move around? Are there other circles connected to that one, like other tribes that your druid can go venture to and meet? Or are they very like a very established colony? Are druid circles something that only happen in certain populations? Like maybe I'll stick with a stereotype. Maybe the elves, the wood elves specifically, those are the only places that druid circles can be. Consider where druid circles are in your world and how your player can connect with them, and then allow them to connect with one. Allow them to go meet some other druids. That would be very cool to do, because then they can learn maybe some new techniques, or maybe they can learn more information about the local surroundings, right? Or maybe they can do a quest. Even if you don't have a druid in your party, just toss a druid circle in there, or toss a lone druid. Maybe you have a group of small towns, and they all rely on this local druid of the big forest nearby, and they rely on that druid to keep the forest safe for hunters and gatherers. Right? Consider how druids affect your world, because they should be in your world. They shouldn't just be something that just the player is. And druids can make excellent villains, because druids, like I said before, are inherently against civilization. Consider having a druid and their forest is encroaching upon a city or a town. Or maybe an army of druids comes through with a whole, like, an army of animals at their following and other fey creatures, right? Or maybe there's a group of underground sort of rogue druids that are summoning fey creatures and causing all these strange accidents to happen. Next is think about what local flora and fauna exist and how your druid can interact. Are there special plants nearby that they can use for medicinal things? I think druids come with herbalism kits, or herbalism kit proficiencies at least, or something like that. Or maybe that's just a hermit and I'm just crossing those wires. But either way, consider what animals are nearby and what plants are nearby, especially because a lot of their spells allow them to interact with them, like speak with animals, locate animals. I think there's like speak with plants later on. So consider what they would know and what kinds there are. And this is something that you should probably do anyway in your world building. And if you have like a pre-made adventure, they usually tell you some things, or they say this is a jungle because you're playing Tomb of Annihilation, and duh, here's all the things in the jungle, or just go Google search, and that's what you can do. You can do a bit of research. And I think in Xanthar's guide and in the player's handbook, and there are other resources online, they can kind of tell you what sorts of things might live in certain terrain types, and that's how you can sort of make your list. I say just a short list, maybe like 5 to 10 animals, maybe 5 to 10 different animals, and 5 maybe plants. Plants a little bit less, especially because it's like they're trees, and that's the grass, and that's a shrub. That's all you need, really, right? The last big one for you, Dungeon Masters, is to make sure you actually take use of Druidic. Druidic is the thieves' cant of Druids. It's this idea that Druids are able to communicate in a relatively non-verbal way. You could potentially make it an actual language that's verbal and spoken, and make it like animalistic grunts or something, or making just repeating the noises of animals, and that allows them to speak to each other. Or you can do more of like a symbology. Personally, I use it in my campaign, and it's where druids can leave notes for each other. Symbols and things in the forest. Maybe it is the certain way that sticks and stones are arranged next to a brook, and that tells them that this water is safe, or that tells them that there is a goblin encampment up the side, right? Or that this area is a sanctuary. Okay, so consider somehow folding in druidic. Either your druid comes across, like just in the wild, they come across something on the ground and they see, wait, this is druidic, and then you tell them what it means. Or maybe you explicitly have a druid meet the players meet a druid, and they're able to actually speak with them in druidic at first. or something like that, right? Just actually use the ability. Otherwise, it's really sad that it just doesn't get used much. And I feel like Thieves' Cant is used a little bit more. So Druidic, try to fold it into your campaign somehow. Just tuck it right in there. All right, let's get to homebrew. So homebrew, there are a couple of good options. The obvious options are to create your own spells or create your own subclasses, or like I said before, to create your own plants and animals and things that the druids can use like that, right? So those are the basic, obvious homebrew that you could do for like any spellcast or any class, right? Creating new subclasses, that's always something you can do. I know I'm personally creating a subclass. My player Melissa, shout out Melissa, playing as Gertie. She's testing a subclass I've built for her because we felt it fit her character a little bit more, and it is a storm subclass. And her centralized feature is she can use her wild shape to instead create a storm, and that storm can have different effects based on which kind of storm she wants to mimic. And so I'm playtesting that with her, and that's something that you can do with your players. And you tell them, hey, let's playtest this. If we feel like it's really strong, we'll dial it back a bit. If it's too weak, we'll make it stronger. Or if we feel like it just doesn't fit the flavor or just doesn't make sense, we'll just ditch it. You can become a moon druid or something. It's very easy to do, in my opinion at least. Although it can be difficult, and make sure there are a couple guides on the internet about how to homebrew classes and make sure it still follows the standard druid subclass sort of progression. The next one is to, like I said, add more animals, and so you would add more animals that your druid can wild shape into. Now, a lot of these can just be simple reflavorings, right? If your character wants to be a giant hawk, but there's no giant hawk, well, at least there's giant eagles. Boom. Pretty much the same thing, right? And you can always adjust hit points and things. You can make a giant Goliath beetle or a giant stag beetle, and you could just make up some hit points. Take some animals that are kind of similar, adjust some hit points, adjust some armor class, maybe give it a special attack like it can flip people or ram them or something, right? Just look at the other animals in the Monsters Handbook and in the Volo's Guide to Monsters and all that. Just look at other options and then consider, okay, how can we take this that's something close and then just tweak a little bit. My last homebrew for you is a bit of a bigger one. Consider giving the druids an animal companion. Now, I know that's a special thing that just the rangers get, and I also suggested this in my ranger video that all rangers should have a minor animal companion, something small like a squirrel or something, or an owl or a hawk, and that the beast masters can be the big animals, right? Well, so druids, I feel like it just makes so much sense for druids to have an animal companion. It wouldn't be a relationship of like one is subservient to the other, one commands the other necessarily, but having an animal companion that can tag along, that they can use speak animal with frequently, that could be a great source for story and a great source for humor. And I don't know, it just fits so well. Even the picture in the book has a person with a hawk on their hand, and it's like that should be easy, right? Now you could say the druids, they may not want to have an animal companion, they want the animals to be free and do what they want, but that's why I said maybe not as subservient. Maybe it's just they can call upon this animal's help for this journey, and then once this adventure is done, they let that animal go free and retire or something, right? Or maybe each time they come into a new local area, like let's say they were in the forest before and now they're going to the mountains, and they happen across a mountain goat, and they have this mountain goat as their like temporary companion. And this will allow your druid to actually use some of the spells like animal friendship, speak with animals, and other ones like that. There be sense. There's a lot of others like that. This would allow them to actually use these spells more reliably instead of having to first go out, spend a few hours, find an animal, get it as your friend, and then use these cool spells. It'll allow them to use it more readily available because this animal's already with you. Overall, though, that is my video on druids. Once again, we talked about a lot of different things. We talked about player tips such as coming prepared with your possible prepared spells and your animals you can turn into. Dungeon Masters, my biggest tip for you is to keep in mind how strong the moon druids are and to make sure that you use druidic. And then for world building and homebrew, we talked about possibly giving animal companions to your druids, and to also make sure that you include circles and druidic circles and other just druids in your world. Those are the biggest things I can think of when it comes to druids. And I want to thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Oh, right over here. Thank you very much. And don't forget, I do have a Twitter, and I occasionally post on there. I usually collect ideas and things on there, or I'll mention, hey, I've got a video coming out soon. And that is also a great way to interact with me. Otherwise, you can just comment right below. And if you want to make sure you get my videos and notifications ahead of time, don't forget to click the bell, because that is a thing now. So thank you very much for watching, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.